Let's take a look at some charts on Synthetix SNX for Brave New Coin. So Synthetix is to me, what I'd consider a lending and borrowing platform, even though it's more of a, what they call derivatives liquidity protocol. The idea is pretty simple. You use the SNX token to mint a variety of synthetic assets, including inverse synthetic assets. I'll explain what those are. They also have a staking component. They have a governance component. They're one of the earlier protocols to move to layer 2, at least partially, with optimism on ETH. So I think they're headed in the right direction as far as what they're doing and why. 2 billion currently locked in SNX. So it's not as big as Maker and Compound, but it's in the top 15 certainly by TVL. So if we look at the synths, they break it down: crypto, forex, equities, commodities. So again, you can use the SNX to purchase these tokens at whatever value the price is here. So one SNX will give you X amount of synthetic euro. And then you can use those in DeFi to trade a variety of things. You can use any of this stuff to then also yield farm on Curve, for example. So it's a nice way to unlock the potential of doing more things with Synthetix. I think the biggest friction, the biggest pain point is it's not USDC, it's Synthetix, right? You have to buy Synthetix to do this, and the Synthetix holders get a piece of the action as far as the fees are concerned. So they try to keep you in the ecosystem, which is fine. Ultimately, though, they may find that they run into some problems with this model, considering some people would just not want to buy Synthetix. I don't know. That's just a potential problem here. Like I mentioned before, they have these inverse products which inversely track the price. So that means you're basically long the short side, or you're short. You know, that's how you can think of it. And these have all sorts of implications for DeFi and any sort of non-custodial portfolio management. I'm able to use these on Enzyme to like short ETH, short BTC when the time comes, short any number of these things, inverse oil. When the time comes, they even have an inverse DeFi index, which is super interesting as well. So all these products certainly have a purpose. And as a trader, they excite me, definitely. If you look at the network, so the market cap is almost 2x the TVL. And these collateralization or collateralized debt products, much like Maker, whereas Maker is multi-collateral, SNX is SNX collateral, right? Total number of SNX holders. I'd like to see like a graph over time. Numbers don't really tell me anything, you know, but that's just a critique for them. Anyway, total active stakers continues to sort of increase and peak a little bit. Now, if you are bullish SNX, you want to see all of this up and to the right, volumes up and to the right. Volumes have kind of come off. You know, that's kind of the theme of all of this. Since February, volumes are down, active addresses are down. I'll get to that in a second. Price obviously down. Number of trades. I mean, the story is here for people paying attention, right? If you're bullish on SNX, if you're bullish on the future of SNX, and you see stats like this, you think, okay, price should be soft, which it is. And if I think SNX has a future, I think this number is going to be greater in the next 6 months than it is now, then I'm buying SNX. You know, that's one way to think about it. If you don't, if you think SNX is going by the wayside, then you just ignore it, right? But that's where the fundamental analysis comes in. This is also interesting. We can look at the total synths. Mostly longs. You know, everything here is mostly longs with some inverse BTC, some inverse ETH. This setup, this dynamic is going to be super interesting in a bear market. Obviously, most of this is probably hedging and not naked shorts or just net short where people are betting on this stuff collapsing. That would be a bit foolish in a bull market, sorry. But anyway, synthetic ETH 45%, synthetic USD 21%, synthetic Link 10%, Euro 8%. Synthetic BTC is kind of on the smaller side in the total dominance at 7%. So this is mainly an ETH show. It makes sense. There's incentives to farm and yield whatever this on Curve and various other places. Here's their staking UI. I think it's rather simple, which is good. Here's the SNX in layer 2, earning 26% APY. If we go to staking rewards, the adjusted reward after inflation is less than 1%. So you're better off lending than staking. Based on the numbers, based on my understanding of what's going on, it looks like 53% of the total supply is being staked at the moment. Here's their governance piece as well. So unlike most of the governance tokens, like Maker, you can't really, I don't think you can use Maker as collateral, but that would be an interesting proposition. Unlike Maker, where you can't use Maker as collateral, you can use SNX as collateral. You can only use SNX as collateral. And there's also a governance component to this. As far as adding things, changing things, all that is influenced by the votes when you connect your wallet and you see how many people have voted for a certain proposal. So like I mentioned, the TVL is around 2 billion according to Synthetix. According to DeFi Pulse, it's a little less than 2 billion right now. And unlike, again, some of these other projects where you can lock in various assets, SNX is mainly just SNX, right? So what you're seeing here is kind of what you get as far as TVL. And I believe this drop was from the layer 2 transition. So that may not be displayed properly here on DeFi Pulse, but nonetheless, 2 billion TVL. A lot of this just tracks the price of SNX because it's what's locked into the protocol. And just to double check those numbers, the bank actually has it at 2.8 billion for some reason, which is above Synthetix own numbers. So not sure what that's about. But if I was bullish, more bullish on SNX, you know, the future of SNX, what would I look for? I would look for TVL numbers going up ultimately, because that just means more SNX in the ecosystem, more synths, more reliance on those type of derivatives in DeFi. If we look at the transaction counts for SNX, again, a bit soft. Most everything SNX related peaked in January and February so far. Now, compared to 2020, most of 2020, these transaction counts are much higher. So in general, SNX is getting a lot more use than it has in the past. Over the past 6 months, we're definitely at a low as far as, I mean, this is a multi-month low at this point for transaction counts. So you have to keep all this in mind when you look at the price, which has also continued to slowly decline since January, February. Here's average transaction values, which don't really tell you too much. But in general, these on-chain metrics for SNX matter way more than anything else that's pure governance, because this is actually has functionality on the platform itself. So you want to see average transaction values high, you want to see transaction counts high, you want to see active addresses up and to the right just continue to rise. Again, January, February was the peak for active addresses, and that's come off rather significantly since that time period. So once price starts to recover, or these metrics start to recover, that typically will be hand in hand, you want to see just continued increases in active addresses. I mean, you can see it here, if you just pop on the price. You can see how price and active addresses are basically one-to-one. If anything, price or active addresses may be leading price just slightly. So definitely very important for SNX to actually have on-chain activity. Here's NVT, inverse metric of economic utility. So although NVT is still basically at all-time lows, it hasn't really influenced too much based on price. NVT just says what is price relative to market cap here, or what is on-chain activity relative to market cap. So if this is falling, it's bullish. If it's rising, it's bearish. And over time, relative to itself, you can see where things have definitely changed, quieted down relative to pre-2020 on-chain wise. But going into 2022, it'll be more important to watch NVT now that there's substantial on-chain activity for SNX. If we look at Google Trends for the term Synthetix, which appears to be mainly just the token or the network, the platform, protocol, whatever, rather than a word in any language, the Google Trends have sort of quieted down. You know, if anything, there's a bit of a bullish divergence here because Google Trends are rising again. So this says there are searches for SNX, there are people looking into SNX, what is SNX, explanations of SNX, stuff like this. This video will function as part of this interest over time as well. So it's still slightly rising, it's still high, it's not in the doldrums at zero or anything like that. So this may be the most bullish thing, as silly as that sounds, for the token price, the Google Trends. If we switch to TA, this is the MA multiplier. So this is the 365 MA. This is the 1 year MA down here. This is 5 times the 1 year MA up here. And although it hasn't necessarily fit the bottoms too well, the tops have been screaming at you each time that price is anywhere near that level. And it's had this very orderly top bottom sort of price action. And when it's at or near the 365 MA, that's the buy zone. When it's above the multiplier, that's the sell zone. And based on this, anything above 42.5, above 45 would be a massive sell. You have an N of 3, so not a ton of data, but if it gets up there again, I'm selling this all day. If it gets below 11.5, which would be a significant downside from here, maybe closer to 10 even, that would be the buy zone again. And you can see previously it didn't quite close in the buy zone. So on backtesting, this isn't like amazing as far as hit rate for tops and bottoms, but the tops are just so convincingly the top each time. But this is exactly what you want to see if you're looking for when should I sell? Is this too hot? Is this too overbought? That sort of thing. So it's just kind of in no man's land at the moment on that. If we look at the 50 and the 200 EMA crosses with volume, VPVR, and RSI on KuCoin, which has most of the trading history, or the most trading history for this pair, you can see a lot of the volume came in 2021. Now, KuCoin isn't exactly the most reputable exchange, so it's hard to really know how much of this is real volume and fake volume. So it's going to skew the VPVR and make it look like most of the volume is up here, because historically it has been, right? But again, if this isn't real volume, then none of this matters, right? These volume stats don't matter. Just kind of showing this to see what it looks like. Nevertheless, if it stays in here, great, right? There's tons of support at these levels. The 200-day moving average is here. What you don't want to see is Price Explorer sub 10. Sub 10, and you may see 2, you may see 5, right? There's volume here, but there's no significant volume there just yet. And I didn't check, but I wonder if there's an inverse SNX synth. That would be super interesting. You could short the asset, short the underlying. So this doesn't look bearish yet. It doesn't look danger flipping bearish. It's more neutral than anything. It had several attempts. Previously, it's had falling wedges that broke up twice. This was a falling wedge that went nowhere. Inverted head and shoulders that went nowhere. And it's just kind of sideways turtle soup type stuff. And that's okay. You know, there doesn't always need to be a bias, right? There's other stuff to trade. There's a billion other things to trade, a billion other time frames to look at. This just doesn't look like a compelling trade one way or the other to me. If we look at the cloud's been kind of dead on the money, telling you go long here, close your long here, go long here, close your long here. And it hasn't given you that go long signal again. So if I was looking for a long here, I would set alerts for a price cross above the cloud flipping green, bullish Kumo twist. Any of those alerts will do. That way you can just ignore SNX and do other stuff. Go fly a kite or whatever you want to do. Some woodworking, some hobbies, and waiting for DeFi as a whole to perhaps have another run. Because right now this is definitely neutral and doesn't give me bullish or bearish feelings one way or the other. If we look at the BTC pair, it looks bearish, which really says something considering BTC has done a bunch of nothing since February, and SNX has been more bearish than that. So in order for me to get bullish again on SNX, it really needs to be above the 200-day moving average. Historically, that's really been the line in the sand where stuff takes off. And that's currently at 35K sats. It's below a yearly pivot. It's in between some decent volume support. So you definitely don't want to see this breaking lows, because then it'll likely test 20K sats. It'll test this low if it breaks this low. That's kind of how I read this. And as far as upside, you know, if you're just blindly bullish, I'd be looking for like 57K sats, basically this yearly pivot retest. And then the SNX ETH chart looks bearish enough to the point where I'd consider rotating into it from ETH, because this is just a nasty free fall. I mean, this is legendary, right? It's like filling the gap of no volume support here, no volume support here, right? This is part of the reason why VPVR or volume profiles are so important, is because when you see this ahead of time, you can say, okay, there's a giant notch here. It's probably going to find support here. It did. Now there's, on the way down, the next support is basically at current price or slightly lower. And if I'm buying knives, taking a stab in the dark into the abyss, this is where I'm buying, is at previous price action, previous consolidation. Once again, this 200-day moving average has been kind of dead on the money, telling you go long, things look bearish, go long, things look bearish. I mean, look how much this would have saved you listening to the 200-day moving average here. Cloud equally as valuable. So at this point, it's so oversold, I'd be watching for mean reversion back to the 200-day moving average, certainly back to this 0065 level, and this RSI looks like a massive falling wedge to me as well. So all signs are pointing to oversold conditions here on this pair. Lastly, I'll just mention two things. The ETH-BTC fund on Enzyme.finance, non-custodial portfolio tool, where you can send USDC or ETH into a smart contract, which allows me to take trades based on the rules we've set for each portfolio. This is just ETH and BTC. I can also trade inverse ETH and BTC. I also have the ability to send some of this towards some interest-bearing yield farming stuff. And the trading decisions here are based on TA as well as fundamental analysis, on-chain metrics, that sort of thing. And you can see allocations, performance, deposits, withdrawals, all the trades I make, and when and where. By the way, all these are done on DEXs. So very transparent and interesting from that perspective. We also have a DeFi portfolio, which we started in early April, and DeFi kind of hasn't done much of anything since then. So this one hasn't popped off like the ETH-BTC portfolio has. But again, you can see allocations, performance, deposits, withdrawals, all that sort of thing. And SNX is also part of this portfolio, currently with an 8.8% allocation. Trading decisions here are more based on the pillars of DeFi, which are oracles, lending and borrowing, DEXs, DEX aggregators, and then miscellaneous stuff like wrappers, and less so on TA and FA. So that's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think of Synthetix in the comments below, and happy trading.